Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Yee, and I'm the owner of Zenith Search Partners. We're a boutique recruiting firm over in the Houston area. Thanks very much for joining me today, and thanks in advance for your attention as I talk for the next few minutes about something that sounds kind of basic and simple, but can really make or break your team uh, for 2026 and beyond. So if you work with me before or if you know me, you guys know that I'm a former engineer, or I am an engineer who no longer works in the engineering space, and I a former chemical salesperson and commercial manager, but I somehow stumbled and bumbled into the recruiting business, and I've been doing it for the last 10 years, doing more permanent full-time uh, specialized recruiting. And I did this because I really like helping serve people, really am into serving people, and also I'm into helping companies build great teams. But um, but because I have an engineering process oriented um, brain, I noticed something that kind of bugs me. Most companies plan for hiring the same way they assemble IKEA furniture, like me, myself, assemble most IKEA furniture. They do it reactively, optimistically, and at the end of the day, they look back and they say, man, that doesn't look quite right because I've got a part or three left, and I swear this has got to be doing something, but it's sitting here in my hand. Hiring and talent management shouldn't be that way. We have to look around corners. We have to be strategic in your hiring plans. You have to just look at hiring strategically, just like you look at everything else, at growth, at costs, as future regulations and other things. So I want to introduce you to something that I use with business owners and hiring managers all the time. I call it a three-part hiring framework. None of it's rocket science. What it is, it's a mindset and approach that helps companies predict with pretty decent accuracy about three different types of hires that your team needs. Not theoretical, not academic, and I promise it won't be boring. I'll do all that I can to keep you engaged. So I come up with this framework from about 10 years of working with chemical companies all over the nation who have engaged us to fill a wide variety of roles. I'm talking from sales to supply chain to chemists to accountants and beyond. So if you've ever wished you started a search 2 or 3 months earlier, if you've ever lost a great candidate because your team wasn't aligned on what you need and when you needed it, and if you've ever had a single point of failure, one employee who was a flight risk that kept you up at night, then this webinar is for you. So let's get to it. So next slide. Before we break down the framework, let me give you the why. Simon Sinek says always start with why. So here we go. Every company, big or small, wrestles with three universal hiring problems. Hiring too late. By the time you start a search, the pain is already there and it's critical. Number two, hiring reactively instead of strategically, which is tied to number one, admittedly. You're responding to a resignation, you're responding to a retirement instead of planning in advance for that. And the other thing is sometimes or oftentimes I see hiring firms who hire without clarity on what they really want, or you have various people on the hiring team or various managers in the firm that disagree on what success looks like. What does a successful hire really look like? Leads to misalignment, inconsistency, and bad hires. Speaking of which, bad hires, very costly. We've all done them, including me as a business owner. We've all done them. So here's the good news. There's a way, right? There's a way you can get out in front of fires before they start burning. You can get out in front of panic and reactive hiring. You can get out in front of these things. So now let's talk about the three-part framework um, uh, right now. It's three C's. We're all into alliteration here. So we've got capacity hires, capability hires, and continuity hires. So we're going to dive deeply into all three of these, and then we're going to wrap it up. So that's where we're going for the next few minutes. So let's first start talking about the first C, which is capacity hires. You say, man, we just need more hands. We need help. We can't handle the work we've got. These are the ones you feel first. These roles come up when demand grows faster than your team can keep up with. You know, um, you know, uh, certain warning signs show up, and they're listed here on this slide. And you can probably add 5 or 6 more, right? You know that you're running your personal engine and the engine of your employees are at red line. Your tachometer is in that red line, and you know that it's not really sustainable. And you see that your quality slips, your time and your service slips, your customer service suffers. And if you have your pulse on your organization, and we all do to some extent, you know that your team sounds tired. You see frustration, right? So, um, so here are some examples of capacity hires. You can hire them for operations, purchasing, sales, technical service, customer service. Um, one of one of my favorite movies of all time is Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner, James Earl Jones, great baseball movie. Costner's character hears a voice that whispers, "If you build it, they will come." It's a very strange voice and a strange meaning. And Kevin Costner's character struggles with this voice most all of the movie. If you build it, then they will come. Well, I'm not advocating. Oh, thankfully, by the end of the movie, everyone understands what the voice means, and it ends on a very happy note, and it's very cool. I'm not advocating that approach to capacity hires. You don't want organizational bloat before people are really needed. That's wasteful, and that expense will stunt your growth because you're spending money on folks that you don't need yet. Having said that, being too reactive to your planned for strategic good fortune and the fruits of your labor down the road, being too reactive is a really bad idea. So what's the answer? You don't want to be too early. You don't want to be too late. What's the answer? The answer is to prepare in advance for your future growth. Have a strategy. Have a plan that allows you to hire relatively quickly. Is there a way you can hire some bench folks who can stand in to take larger roles when the time is right? I know that answer is not always yes, but preparing for growth from a recruiting and talent management perspective is critical. That lets you see around that capacity hire conundrum that most people find themselves in. Most people find themselves in a reactive mode. So that takes care of the first C. The second C is capability hires. Capability hires fill a skill set or your need or a need that your team doesn't currently have. It's about seeing around corners in terms of opportunities that really aren't there and perhaps weren't forecasted years ago or even, you know, months ago. So here are some triggers for the capability hires. You have new technical requirements, you have new regulations, you have the possibility to expand in a new market or service, upstream of where you play now, downstream of where you play now, adding another service, serving another end use. Those things can all drive capability hires. So I often see companies that try to coach their way out of a capability hire, and mentor their way out of a capability hire. Look, coaching is great. And I could do another 30 slides on the good and the bad and the ugly that I've seen of coaching over the last 32 years that I've had in industry. But let's just suffice to say that coaching is great, right? But if you're asking somebody to become a chemist or something in 3 weeks, that is not the right way to go. So again, um, being slow to react to capability needs puts you in that reactive, let's move too fast, let's be too reactive, and let's make a bunch of mistakes mindset. So you want to look around corners and see where your next capability hires would be. I have two real world examples for you for capability hires because they're completely different than the capacity hires. One of them is old school. Back in 1970, when the world was young and well, it was pre-internet, pre-cell phone. 1970, the Clean Air Act drove a ton of changes in the paint and coatings industry, especially with respect to volatile organic compounds, what they call VOCs. These high VOC paints were dangerous, and it forced companies to change, forced paint and coatings manufacturers to change the way they did business, change the way they formulate, change the way they make their paint, change the way they market the paint, change all of that. So it drove all kinds of needs in the 1970s and in subsequent decades. But here's a more recent example: PFAS chemicals, PFAS chemicals. You can Google that later, but it's a group of chemicals that have been around since the 1940s and the 1950s. So very ubiquitous for, not too far from 100 years. But over time, the danger of these chemicals, the inherent danger of these chemicals to public health, especially in drinking water, became known. And just last year, April 2024, the EPA introduced a nationwide, legally enforceable standard for drinking water for 6 specific PFAS chemicals. This requires companies and utilities and firms to comply with this new regulation, or these new set of regulations over the next few years. Both of these examples, from the 1970s with the high VOC paints, which smelled a lot, to PFAS chemicals, which represent a pretty bad thing to public health. Both of these examples drive the need for capability hires. Last word on capability hires. These are actually opportunities for market differentiation. This allows companies who are on the leading edge to be first to market with various products, with various approaches, with various products. So don't think of it as an extra burden on your firm. Think of it as an opportunity. All right, last C, talked about capacity, talked about capability. Now we're going to talk about continuity hires. It's the most overlooked category. It's most dangerous to ignore, but in some sense, it's the most obvious because it's something you see every day. How many times have you said, oh my goodness, we've got a single point failure? If such and such leaves, if so and so leaves, we're in trouble because our customer relationship our key customer relationships are going to really suffer. We're in trouble because 40 years of tribal knowledge is going to go fishing. We're going to be at risk because we have no successor to that executive, right? So most leaders and most organizations know where these single points of failures are, but they don't always take action until it's too late. Here's a real story. Here it is, late 2025. Within the past 4 or 5 months, we have been contacted by certain folks, by numerous folks, for continuity hires. It's, oh my goodness, person ABC is going to walk out the door. She's announced or he's announced their retirement plans for sometime very soon. Goodness, I should have seen this coming, but I can't. I need somebody right away because this person's going to leave in the next fill in the blank weeks. So in that case, and it happens all the time, people don't take action until it's too late. It's kind of analogous to the fact that you're hearing a weird noise in your tires when you turn a weird noise from the front end of your car, and you solve it by turning up the radio or turning up your podcast. So you have these signs that you need a continuity. You have a retirement risk, or you have a person who's never complained before but is complaining now loudly, and this is a key member of your team. These are single points of failure where you have no clear path. So get out in front of those continuity red flags by having a forecast, having a plan, having a strategy that you can immediately put into play. So just a couple more slides here. So how to forecast quickly, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, but how to forecast quickly. Ask your team, ask yourself 3 questions. It's a look around the corner questions. Where are we stretched? Where do I see us coming apart at the seams a little bit? Where do I see that if things continue to trend this way, I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to need people? Okay. Capability. What skills are missing from my team? Where do I want to expand? What is the market telling me, or what is the government regulation and government standards telling me? Where are those winds going to blow this industry and my company in the next 1, 3, 10 years? Continuity. Where are we vulnerable? Where's that single point failure? You want to, if that person walks out the door, what are we going to do? And are we prepared for that? So ask yourself these look around the corner questions, and the results from those deserve prioritization. Rank them by urgency and importance. And I'd like to quickly take a sidestep here about the difference between what's urgent and what's important. Look, we're all busy, and every day you come to work with dozens of really, really urgent things. I get it. I've been there and am there. But urgent does not necessarily equal important. All too often, the things that are important are overshadowed by things that manifest themselves by urgent. And it's so easy to take care of the urgent fires versus addressing the important smoldering pile that will turn in ultimately to a raging fire. So be very careful to differentiate between urgent and important. The goal of this entire slide deck is to encourage folks like me to concentrate more on the important versus the urgent. So you got to think strategically. You got to look around corners to see what's upcoming this quarter, this year, this half year. So turn all that into a hiring roadmap. Turn all that into a strategy for what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, and build yourself a timeline and be respectful of that timeline. You don't want to wake up and say, oh my goodness, I needed to hire somebody yesterday, because that drives a bunch of bad and frankly risky behavior. You want to learn more? Call me. Hook me up. I've got all kinds of lists. I've got all kinds of questions. I've got all kinds of checklists that are designed to help companies kind of figure out a strategy. But like I said in my first slide, I'm a people person. right? I like interacting with folks. I love learning and listening. And arguably, I've got a little wisdom that might mean something to somebody. But hey, hit this QR code. Tell me what you need. I commit to you that I'll give you a 30-minute, totally free, totally no strings attached consultation. Let's just talk it through. What, how can I serve you? And the reasons why I got into this business, perhaps the biggest reason why I got into this business, because I felt a desire to serve the industry that has been so good to me over the last 3+ decades. So I would love to hear what you've got on your mind and to see what, if anything, I could do to be a solutions provider. So that's that. Thank you very much. Leave you with these last two calls to action and, call to action. Don't be reactive. Be proactive. Look around corners. Ask yourself those questions that aren't necessarily the most urgent thing on your plate today, but are arguably very, very important. So don't be reactive. Be proactive. And then secondly, lean on other people. Lean on folks that might have some expertise and some experience in how to navigate these waters, whether that's me or someone else. Just lean on folks because there are folks out there that are willing and able to help serve you and your firm. So that's all I've got. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Again, hit me up with that QR code and I will be sure to respond. All right. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.